Chapter 29, The Revels of Helga Hufflepuff. They landed heavily in the front garden of the Potter cottage. Draco took shallow breaths through his parted lips, the air thick with pollen, almost suffocating. The only sound was the rustle and flap of the tents around them. No one spoke, though everyone was looking in his direction. He couldn't meet their eyes. What was there to say? They all knew the truth. There would be no miraculous antidote to save his father from the venom of the sword. Lucius had already been losing consciousness when they escaped. By now, he was gone. Draco understood this, yet part of him refused to accept it. His father, the very foundation of his identity for so long, couldn't simply have crumbled away in a matter of confused seconds. He couldn't be gone. His gaze fell first on Dobby, the house elf, who was staring up at him with wide, tennis ball-sized eyes. Sir, Dobby said, looking away. Draco detected a hint of sympathy in the elf's voice, but there was no sign of regret on his face. Dobby's words seemed to puncture the fog of shock surrounding him. Ron swallowed hard and shook his head slightly. What are we going to do? He whispered hoarsely. Hermione. But their arrival had drawn attention. The door of headquarters burst open, and a terrified-looking Mr. and Mrs. Weasley rushed into the garden, followed by a dozen members of the Order. What on earth happened? Mrs. Weasley demanded. Ronald Weasley, where did you go? What were you doing? You should have been back 20 minutes ago. You said you were going somewhere safe, you said. Her tirade faltered as she scanned their group, concern etched on her face. Everyone seemed to arrive at the same question simultaneously. Where's Hermione? Bill asked in a quiet voice. Bellatrix has her. The word slipped from Draco's lips, but his voice sounded foreign to him. Hands clamped over her mouth. She was one of the few who moved. Most of the Order stood frozen, as if petrified. Remus was the first to regain his composure. Bellatrix will not kill Hermione, he said. His face grave but his voice steady. We know that much. She will be an immensely valuable prisoner. How did it happen, Potter? Kingsley asked, his tone urgent. Why were you near Lestrange? Harry explained the situation in broad strokes, carefully omitting details about the Horcrux. The revelation that they had gone to Gringotts sparked an immediate flurry of questions, but to Draco, none of it mattered. He stared blankly at the veins of ivy climbing the walls of Potter Cottage. His father's body was likely still lying on the steps. Who would claim it? And even now, Bellatrix might be whisking Hermione, or his mother, back to the Lestrange house to torture them. His mind had no room for anything else. Not even thoughts of the Horcrux or how they would destroy it. Remus was right, though. Bellatrix would keep Hermione alive. She would want to trade Hermione for the cup, and now that they had stolen it right from under her nose, Bellatrix wouldn't dare summon Voldemort. It was another shred of hope that Draco clung to like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. Still, none of this would stop Bellatrix from inflicting harm on Hermione in ways only she could devise. A wave of nausea churned in Draco's stomach. He wanted to run, to scream, to shatter something. He focused on the Lestrange house in his mind. Yes, they had to storm the place. They needed to rally the hundreds of people from the safe houses to Bellatrix's doorstep. It would invite open warfare on her grounds, but Draco didn't care. He was ready to burn their plans to the ground for this one chance, to save the only two people left in the world that he loved. He was opening his mouth to demand that the Order take action when Harry staggered, pressing his palm to his scar. In the next instant, Harry's knees buckled, and Draco and Ron rushed to catch him. Harry was twitching, his mouth agape. What's happening to him? Fred asked, stepping forward as they carefully lowered Harry to the grass. The rest of the Order quickly gathered around. Ginny knelt by Harry's side, gripping his hand tightly. It took a full minute for Harry's eyes to finally open. What is it? Draco demanded, urgency lacing his voice. What did you see? He's back, Harry gasped, struggling to sit up. Voldemort. He's back in the country. He just heard about Gringotts. He knows that Bellatrix was there. He's worried that. He shot a glance at Ron and Draco. He's worried. What's his plan? Ron asked, his brow furrowing. He's going there, Harry panted, to Gringotts. And once he finds out that he'll go to. He looked around at the order, frustration creeping into his expression, to where the others were. Draco interjected, dismissing the order's confused murmurs. Exactly. Harry swallowed hard, then Hogwarts. Hogwarts? Luna said, her voice surprisingly sharp. Why would he go to the school? Draco's grip tightened on the Elder Wand. There's something he wants on the grounds. You four, Ginny said quietly, you haven't been working on occlumency at all. This is what you've been doing. It has to do with what Voldemort wants and what he's been up to this past year. The look Harry gave her was a mix of apology and affection. Yeah. Plodding, Pansy sighed, picking at her fingernail. Why didn't you bloody tell us? George asked, shooting an accusatory glare. Yeah. Fred echoed, you mean we could have been helping you four stop you-know-who from getting some secret weapon or something? It was too much of a risk. Harry replied impatiently, pushing himself to his feet. And Dumbledore told us we mustn't. Albus put this on your backs? A rough voice interrupted from the edge of the group. Aberforth stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Dobby and Winky stood there, their brilliantly blue eyes locked onto Harry. And even now, with your friend's neck on the line, you're still defending his saintly memory? Harry clenched his fists. Look, I don't have time to argue about your brother. We need to get to Hogwarts, right now. We have to beat Voldemort there because there's something we need, too. His gaze drifted to the cup-shaped lump in Ron's pocket. Draco could tell he was thinking of the Chamber of Secrets. His heartbeat began to thud in his ears. No, he said, his voice rising. What about Hermione? Are we really just going to leave her with Bellatrix? He stepped back from Harry, bumping into someone as he maneuvered through the crowd of the Order. Feeling claustrophobic, he craved space to breathe. You can all do what you want. I'm going to the Lestrange house, and, Draco, Harry interrupted sharply, Bellatrix is going to bring Hermione and your mum right to us. Draco froze. Why? Because we're going to stand and fight at Hogwarts. Harry scanned the assembled members of the Order, raising his voice. We need to start sending word. Everyone who's on our side must get to the castle. It's now or never. We know that's where Voldemort's headed, and if we don't stop him now, his next move will be to emerge from the shadows and seize control as Minister for Magic. This is our chance. He turned back to Draco. Once Voldemort realizes I'm waiting for him at Hogwarts, he'll call the Death Eaters there. Bellatrix will be at the top of that list, and she'll have them with her. Draco struggled to make sense of it all. He fought to impose logic onto his chaotic thoughts, desperate to feel something other than fear and panic, a pressing urge to act. There was a certain logic to Harry's plan. Draco knew every inch of Hogwarts and its security measures, while the Lestrange house and its defenses were complete unknowns. It might be easier to stage a defense at the castle. An ambush awaited Bellatrix's arrival at the castle, but they needed to control where she would enter the grounds and where she intended to keep Hermione. Suddenly, the final piece fell into place, the mirror. The entire plan unfolded before him. They would reach Hogwarts, seize control of the castle, destroy the Horcrux, and then transfigure a copy. Using the mirror, they would arrange a trade with Bellatrix, the cup for Hermione and his mother. Draco, at last, nodded in agreement. But Aberforth wasn't finished. So, your plan is to go to that castle and use yourself as bait, Potter? His face flushed with anger. You'll put all your friends, these kids. He gestured toward Draco, Ron, Ginny, Luna, and Pansy, on the front lines and watched them die. He turned to the older members of the Order. Maybe the boy doesn't know better, but you all saw what happened last time. You know how few made it out alive. I can speak for myself, Aberforth, Harry replied, his voice firm. I'm not going to sit here in headquarters while everyone else risks their lives for me. I can choose the kind of world I want to live in, or die for. I made that choice years ago. Aberforth's gaze, strikingly similar to Dumbledore's, pierced into Harry. Finally, he raised a hand to his forehead. smoothing out the wrinkles with his fingertips. "All right. Then. You'll follow my brother's commands from the afterlife, but when you follow Albus, you do so on faith." Aberforth looked from Harry to McGonagall, then to Remus and Hagrid. He shook his head, tugging at his long, scraggly beard. "Secrets, lies, and master plans," he muttered. "I know where that leads you." "So, you're staying here, then?" Ginny asked coldly. Aberforth appeared weary as he turned toward the cottage, his arm hanging heavily at his side. "I'll come to Hogwarts, girl," he muttered. "It'll be the end. All of this, one way or another." The heavy door to headquarters thudded shut behind him, leaving an expectant silence in its wake. Harry stood rigidly, his gaze lingering on Aberforth's retreating figure. Draco noticed that Harry's hand had tightened around the moleskin pouch where he kept the snitch. Finally, Fleur cleared her throat. "We must act quickly. Tell me, how are we meant to get into Hogwarts? Surely the front gates will be too heavily guarded and will draw too much attention." Harry hesitated, still lost in thought about Aberforth's words. Draco turned to Hagrid and asked, "What about that gamekeeper's gate in the Forbidden Forest? Can we use it? Or has Snape tampered with it?" "Can't tamper with that gate," Hagrid scoffed. "Been around as long as the castle, it has. It only opens for the keeper of keys and grounds." "That's still me, mind," he added, proudly patting the front pocket of his overcoat, which jingled in response. Professor McGonagall spoke with a shrewdness that commanded attention. "Still, Snape will undoubtedly have cast advanced charms around the gate, so he'll be alerted if anyone tries to enter that way. But Snape, for all his master's teachings," her nostrils flared with disdain, "is only the second most powerful charms caster at Hogwarts. Dobby, Winky, if you're willing to help us further, I ask that you find Professor Flitwick and bring him to the gate to meet us. I dare say that between the two of us, we can undo whatever our dear headmaster may have prepared." As they began to smuggle their allies from the safe house into the Forbidden Forest, the next vision struck. Draco and Ron sat beside Harry among the trees, waiting for 5 long minutes for him to return to himself. But this time, Harry didn't gasp or jerk back to reality. His eyes opened slowly, as if he had deliberately re-entered his body. "He knows?" Draco asked, breaking the silence. "He knows," Harry confirmed. "So he's going to check the cave?" Ron inquired. Ron spoke up, "The shack is next." They lingered over this information for a moment. Voldemort was aware that they were hunting for the fragments of his precious soul, and it wouldn't be long before he came searching for the wand that Draco held tightly in his palm. Draco peered out from the tree line. Beyond Hagrid's hut and across the shimmering lake, there stood Hogwarts, its turrets and towers rising majestically, the ramparts casting geometric shapes across the rolling lawns. For a fleeting moment, he could almost envision himself strutting up that lawn alongside his father at just 6 years old. He had spent countless days at Hogwarts as a child, granted free reign thanks to his father's governorship. Lucius had introduced him to everything: the magnificent gates, the Slytherin common room, the sumptuous meals in the Great Hall. Yet, now, he couldn't shake the memory of the hesitation that had crossed his father's face before Bellatrix had begun to taunt him, in that brief instant. Lucius had known the truth and struggled to comprehend it. Draco's throat tightened, making it hard to breathe. He ran his fingertips over the mirror tucked away in his pocket. Would he have found the same glimmer of understanding if he had simply told his parents the truth months ago? They had all been together at headquarters, safe and sound. Could he have taken that time to explain, to persuade them, instead of using them as mere props in Bellatrix's schemes? He closed his eyes, blocking out the sight of Hogwarts, shutting out everything but the present moment. He gripped the handle of the mirror so tightly that the brass filigree pressed into his skin. There was nothing he could do for his father now. His focus had to be on Hermione and his mother. Not long after they had left headquarters, Bellatrix had attempted to reach them through the mirror, calling out Draco's name, then Harry's, and even Ron's, her voice laced with fury. It had taken every ounce of his self-control not to respond, but they needed to secure Hogwarts first. Only then could they tell Bellatrix to meet them here, or else she would alert the Death Eaters. The Eaters and the Ministry reported that the castle was under attack. Draco stood up and began to pace, refusing to let himself imagine what might be happening to them. He couldn't afford to think that way. As the afternoon faded into evening and their allies gathered in the forest, coming not just from the safe houses but also from pockets of resistance across the country, Harry was overwhelmed by a series of vivid visions. He saw Voldemort making his way to the Gaunt Shack, where he spent over an hour unraveling the intricate enchantments that had once concealed the ring. Then, a sense of real dread washed over Harry as he witnessed Voldemort traveling to the cave, crossing over the lake filled with inferi, only to find an empty basin waiting for him, one that had been drained long ago by Regulus Black. The rage and disbelief that erupted from Harry felt like a whirlwind of destructive magic, spiraling out of control. Just moments after this vision, Pansy, Ginny, and Luna emerged from the darkening trees. "There you are," Pansy said, sidling up to Ron and leaning against the tree beside him. Ron's ears turned predictably red at her sudden closeness, his gaze softening as he looked down at the top of her dark-haired head. Draco would never have guessed this from Ron, especially after he had endured such a publicly embarrassing relationship with Lavender Brown the previous year, but whatever was happening between Ron and Pansy was intensely private. Had it not been for the way they looked at each other, as if they had just floated away from the earth, no one might have even realized they were involved. Maybe it was a reaction to the twins' incessant teasing. Draco tried to push aside memories of the night they all collided in the side garden, the way he felt Hermione's heart racing against his fingertips as they kissed, how safe she had felt in that moment, and how determined he was to keep them together. He dug his fingernails into his palms. "We've just come from the last safe house," Luna said. "They're looking for you three." She had barely finished speaking when Kingsley, McGonagall, Remus, and Tonks emerged from the shadows of the forest. "We've gathered everyone we could reach right away, Potter," Kingsley said, his voice steady. "Now, what's your plan for getting us into the castle?" "Plan, you say?" Fred chimed in, jogging up from behind the others. "I think that's our plan you're talking about," George added with a grin. "Go on, then," Tonks encouraged. "Well, we owe it to Harry," Fred explained. "In his last year, he showed us this fantastic room in the castle that can do just about anything you need." "So," George continued, "we ran a few experiments. For instance, if I were to unleash a swarm of engorged centipedes on the lawn while Headmaster Umbridge was out for her evening stroll. And if I happened to be inside the room of requirement at that moment, asking it to create a passage to the grounds for George to escape. Would it work?" "It did," Fred confirmed. "So we've enlisted Dobby and Winky to go in and open a passage into the Forbidden Forest." Remus smiled, glancing between Fred and George. "Very impressive, you two." Fred and George beamed, bowing in unison. "An honor to have the approval of Mr. Mooney himself," Fred declared. Professor McGonagall sighed. "I suppose I should be grateful you only had 1 year to make use of this." "Where's the passage, then?" Draco asked sharply. "You're leaning on it," George replied. Draco turned to inspect the tree behind him. It bore a white chalk bex, and as he looked closer, he noticed fine cracks in the bark that formed the outline of a door. He placed a hand against the rough surface and pushed. To his surprise, the door in the tree swung open, revealing an enormous, vacant hall that could accommodate hundreds. Just inside stood Dobby, Winky, and Neville Longbottom. Meanwhile, sweat stung Hermione's eyes as she staggered to a stop in front of the gates of Hogwarts. 2 winged boars flanking the gate appeared to be aflame, their forms reflecting the vibrant hues of the sunset. Bellatrix hissed something to the contingent of Auror standing on the other side of the gate, prompting one of them to sprint toward the castle. As Bellatrix paced restlessly before the gate, Hermione observed her warily, too afraid to move for fear of drawing attention. Her wrists throbbed with pain. She had lost track of how long it had been since they left Gringotts. 2 hours, 3? The ropes binding her hands had chafed her skin raw. During that time, she had braced herself for the torture and interrogation that had yet to come. When Draco, Harry, and Ron vanished with the Horcrux, Bellatrix's demeanor had shifted to one of sheer terror. She had taken Hermione and Narcissa to the Lestrange Manor, where Hermione was stripped of her beaded bag before being locked in a windowless room. Since then, Bellatrix had dragged them to half a dozen different locations: the street outside the Ministry of Magic, a decrepit house that reeked of decay, and a desolate field far from civilization. They had spent the most time in that field, with Bellatrix pacing as the sun dipped lower in the sky, her lips moving silently as if rehearsing excuses for Voldemort. But now, it seemed Bellatrix had made up her mind. Soon enough, the aura returned, accompanied by Severus Snape. Hermione's mouth went dry. She had suspected he was the reason for their presence. But she hadn't fully prepared herself for the sight of him. The last time she had seen Snape, he had struck Dumbledore dead on that stormy night above Surrey. She could still picture his face twisted with loathing as he uttered the curse. Snape raised a hand to dismiss the guards. As the half-dozen Aurors retreated up the lawn, out of earshot, he approached the gates. "Welcome, Bellatrix," he said in his soft, sneering voice. "To what do I owe the honor?" Bellatrix appeared to be engaged in an internal battle. Struggled to find her voice. "Snape, I need information. Something extremely delicate, something of utmost importance." She hesitated, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "I seek your assistance. It concerns the Dark Lord, I see," Snape replied. With a flick of his wand, the enchanted chains on the gates glowed and slid open. Hermione gasped as Bellatrix seized her by the hair and dragged her through the entrance, flinging her to her knees at Snape's feet. He looked down at her, his sallow, impassive face framed by greasy black hair. The cold, pitch-black eyes that had once betrayed nothing but disdain now seemed to barely register her presence. Instinctively, Hermione averted her gaze, focusing instead on the clasp of his cloak. She mentally recited the acclimacy steps that Draco had often repeated to Harry: "Clear your mind, take control. Submerge all fear, doubt, and self-consciousness." Snape turned his head toward Wormtail and Narcissa as they slipped through the gate. At the sight of Draco's mother, surprise flickered across Snape's face for the first time. "Narcissa, I must admit, this is unexpected. You survived the Order's attack on Malfoy Manor a year ago. If so, where have you been?" "Do not question her, Snape," Bellatrix snapped. "My sister has endured a great betrayal. She allowed me access to her mind, and I witnessed precisely how she was deceived." Hermione's attention sharpened at that. If Bellatrix had used legilimency on Narcissa, it meant that Narcissa had managed to conceal some truths from her sister. Hadn't Draco's mother hinted at giving information to the Order, playing both sides? That revelation should have made Bellatrix reject her outright, yet here she stood, defending her sister. With a surge of courage, Hermione dared to glance up at Narcissa. Draco's mother appeared as though she might be faint. She didn't look down at Hermione. "Please," Snape said, "enlighten me. That whelp of hers has gone over to the Order." He fed her lie after lie, all that Narcissa tried to do for him, and for the Dark Lord, and this is the thanks she gets. As for her fool of a husband. Narcissa let out a tiny sound. "He was never worthy of you," Bellatrix spat, gripping Narcissa by the upper arm with fierce disdain. "He may have been loyal in the end, but he was weak. Now you are free of the Malfoy stain. Be grateful, sissy." "You mean to say that Lucius is dead?" Snape asked, his gaze fixed on Narcissa. "And Draco has joined the Order of the Phoenix?" "I wouldn't have expected that of him." "He has done worse than just join the Order, Snape. He's been taken in by this scum." Bellatrix pointed a finger at Hermione. "This mudblood somehow ensnared him." "Is that so?" Snape murmured, his cold eyes boring into Hermione once more. "I was under the impression that Miss Granger had all the charm of a wilting houseplant." Hermione's jaw clenched, a surge of heat coursing through her, but it wasn't humiliation. It was a powerful pulse of defiance. Did Snape really think his pathetic jabs could still affect her? She had spent this year rebuilding the Order from the ground up after he had torn it apart. She had survived a ministry intent on erasing her from wizarding society. Did he think she was still that fourth-year girl who burst into tears when he'd looked at her magically grown buck teeth and said, "I see no difference"? In that moment of hatred, clarity struck her. Hermione fixed her gaze on the castle behind Snape. Unbeknownst to him, The elves within were free and sympathetic to the order, and the Gryffindors she knew so well were likely dining in the Great Hall at this very moment. Was it so impossible that she might find a way to escape within? The Malfoy boys disgusting. Habits mean nothing to me, Bellatrix sneered. What truly matters is what they've done, what Potter has taken. Is that so? Yet it seems you have some valuable collateral. Why not offer Potter his friend in exchange? Do you think I haven't already tried? Bellatrix began to pace back and forth across the narrow path. I devised the same plan, Snape. I operate to the street in Godric's Hollow where their headquarters are hidden. I declared that I would kill the girl unless they returned what they stole. But there was no reply. Either the Order has abandoned the place, or they've decided her life is a worthy price for this blow. She stopped just a foot away from Snape. But you know Potter, she whispered. You taught him for 6 years, you penetrated his mind at Dumbledore's request. You must have some idea of how we could lure him into the open. The mudblood is one bargaining chip, but perhaps we could take his little friends at school hostage? Hostages at my school? Snape said, his lip curling in disdain. Do you intend to frighten Hogwarts parents out of the country, Bella? If necessary. Bellatrix's eyes widened with intensity. She lowered her voice to a whisper, even though the Aurors were 50 yards away, out of earshot. It's not safe to discuss this here, Snape. Take us to your office. And I will tell you everything. Very well, Snape replied, reluctantly conceding. Bellatrix flicked her wand, and a long rope appeared, connecting to the bindings around Hermione's wrists. She tossed the end of the rope carelessly to Wormtail, who gave it an experimental tug. Avoiding Hermione's gaze, he shot sour looks at the other Death Eaters, clearly resentful of being assigned such a menial task. As Hermione staggered to her feet, a fresh surge of loathing washed over her, this time directed at Pettigrew. He didn't deserve Harry's defense of his life back in their 3rd year. Bellatrix cast a silencing charm on Hermione, followed by a disillusionment charm, before they began their ascent up the path toward Hogwarts. Hermione's eyes widened in a mix of fear and determination. Moved from the front door to the windows of the Great Hall, at this hour, the Great Hall would typically be bustling with students gathered for dinner. Hermione's heart raced as they stepped through the towering front doors. Peering into the Great Hall, she spotted none other than Parvati Patil and Lavender Brown, seated at the end of the Gryffindor table, enjoying their meal. She held her breath as they drew closer, 20 feet away, now 15. In a surge of desperation, Hermione threw herself against the ropes binding her. They snapped free from Pettigrew's clumsy grip, and he let out a startled yelp, with a glimmer of hope. She bolted toward the Great Hall door, calling out Parvati's and Lavender's names, though no sound escaped her lips. She was so near, she could almost smell the delicious food at the nearest table when suddenly, she heard Bellatrix's voice hiss, Crucio. The world around her exploded in agony as she was thrown off her feet, vision blurred. She felt as if she were losing herself, her mind collapsing into a tight knot of pain. It was as if her skin was being torn apart, her bones shattered, the suffering both sharp and profound. Desperately, her fingernails clawed at the floor of the entrance hall, and for a brief moment, she recalled the nervous excitement she felt on the day she had arrived. Nearly 7 years ago, for the sorting. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the spell lifted. Struggling to raise her head, she saw Parvati and Lavender right there, chatting with Seamus across the table. They were discussing something about Flitwick's exam, and it all felt surreal. Help, she croaked, trying to crawl toward the threshold, but her body wouldn't obey. Help me. Waves of pain coursed through her like the frantic scuttling of 1,000 insects. Very careless, Wormtail, came Snape's sibilant voice. One would almost think you wanted Ms. Granger to escape. No. Pettigrew sputtered, panic rising in his voice. Me, what do I care for a mudblood like that? Anyone can make a mistake. She caught me by surprise. No more accidents, then, Bellatrix interrupted sharply, pointed her wand at Hermione and intoned, Imperio. Neville Longbottom let out a roar that echoed throughout the hall, and the Gryffindors responded in kind. They rushed in, enveloping him in a hug that nearly knocked him off his feet. Just as Draco slipped in behind them, Neville pointed a finger at him and let out a startled gasp. Draco strode past, choosing to ignore Neville. He knew he should probably be trying to mend fences, to show that they were on the same side now, but all he felt was a growing impatience. The sooner their forces took control of Hogwarts, the sooner they could access the mirror. Which felt like a weighty stone in his pocket. 10 minutes later, the hall was packed with nearly 1,000 people, the door sealed tightly behind them. "All right," Harry addressed the assembled order. "Neville, everyone's still at dinner, right?" "Right," Neville confirmed. "Except, Harry, I don't know where he's gone, but Snape's not there." Harry swore quietly under his breath. "That's going to be a problem," Kingsley replied, concern etched on his face. "Can't we locate him with the Marauder's map?" Ginny suggested. Ron shook his head, frustration evident. "It's in Hermione's bag." Then, Remus chimed in. "I think we should move in groups of 4 instead of 2, just in case anyone runs into Snape on the way." "Good idea," Harry nodded. "Everyone remember where they're supposed to go?" "We've covered everything, right?" Percy Weasley cleared his throat and began reading from a sheet of parchment. "We're to wait in the 4 common rooms, the staff room, the teachers' offices, the library, and the detention rooms in the dungeons. Filch, the Carrows, and Professor Snape are to be stunned on sight. Younger students will be informed of their evacuation through the room of requirement, while older students and teachers will be invited to join the Order's efforts. Our goal is to have the castle ready to defend within the hour." And, Dobby exclaimed, bouncing on his toes, his bat-like ears wiggling with excitement. "Dobby and Winky have already spoken with the House Elves, Harry Potter, sir. They are ready to assist in any way they can. Perfect." "Thanks, Dobby, Professor Flitwick. Whenever you're ready." Tiny Professor Flitwick stood on a plinth near the exit door. As each member of the Order passed beneath him, the Charms Professor gently tapped them on the head, disillusioning them so thoroughly that when Draco looked down at his hands, he could barely discern any substance there. Silently, they crept through the halls of Hogwarts. While the rest of the Order scattered to their posts, Draco remained with Harry and Ron by the windows. "Ron," Harry said, "I'd better keep the cup in here. Just in case." Ron handed him the Horcrux, which Harry quickly stashed into the moleskin pouch. "Come on," Draco urged, already striding toward the stairwell with the Elder Wand drawn. "Where do you think Snape's gone?" "No idea," Harry replied, "but if we see him, we run," Draco interrupted, sensing the vengeful edge in Harry's voice. "He might not kill you, Potter, but me and Weasley." Silence lingered from Harry's direction, which Draco interpreted as disgruntled agreement. They quickened their pace, stepping onto the grand staircase and hurrying onto one of the moving stairways, which glided out into the void. Just as the stairway slowed, preparing to connect with a new landing, a dark silhouette appeared in the threshold ahead. They all froze. Draco braced himself to see black hair and the headmaster's robes, but it wasn't Snape. It was Crabbe, tall and burly, wiping something red off his hand. Crabbe, now sporting a gleaming head boy badge on his robes. In an instant, Harry's arm shot up, ready to hex him. Crabbe must have sensed the movement because, drawing on the Carrow's teachings, far more than he had ever grasped from other instructors, he dove out of the way, landing on another departing staircase. The stairway echoed with the command, "Finite." As their disillusionment charms faded away, shocked gasps erupted from the portraits surrounding them. And Crabbe's jaw dropped in disbelief. His gaze shifted from Harry to Draco. "You," he said softly, as he always had. "You're alive." "Yeah, that's right," Draco replied, anger twisting in his stomach as memories of Crabbe's words at the manor flooded back, how he'd said Draco deserved to die. For a fleeting moment, staring into the face of an old friend, Draco wanted to demand if Crabbe had truly meant it, but before he could voice his thoughts, Harry and Ron shouted, "Stupefy." Crabbe ducked behind the stone rails of the stairway just in time. The hexes struck a set of stairs behind him, sending chips of stone flying through the grand staircase. "I can't get an angle," Harry said. Darting to the edge of the landing, desperately trying to aim his wand around the rails. Hey, Crab, Ron jeered, clearly trying to provoke him into showing his face. Who in their right mind would make you head boy? Did you transfigure that pin yourself? Macmillan got a few too many detentions, Crab's deep voice replied, but I helped teach him how to act right. Fury flashed across the Gryffindors' faces. Here, Ron said, leaping onto the next section of the stairway, I'll go after him. You two need to get to the chamber before he raises the alarm, go. But barely had Ron's section of the stairway begun to move when Draco heard Crab's slow laughter echoing through the vast hall. In another life, he had done everything he could to elicit those laughs from Crab and Goyle. Now, that sound twisted his stomach. What's so funny, Crab? He asked sharply. Nothing. Just that you're alive. I like that, Crab replied, his tone unsettling. For a brief moment, Draco entertained the thought that Crab was admitting he'd missed him, but then Crab stood up, revealing his left sleeve rolled up, exposing the dark mark branded on his forearm. Now you get to see me do everything you couldn't, Crab sneered, lowering his finger to the dark mark on his forearm. Just then, Draco snarled, stupefy. The spell shot through the grand staircase, striking Crab squarely in the shoulder. He staggered back, collapsing over the opposite rail, but it was too late. With Crab's arm draped over the stone, Draco caught sight of the skull, burned jet black against his skin. Meanwhile, Hermione lay very still on the rug in the headmaster's office, doing her best to remain unnoticed. For the moment, the others were focused elsewhere. Narcissa and Wormtail occupied 2 chairs before the desk, while Bellatrix paced behind them, recounting the incident at Gringotts to Snape, who sat in the headmaster's seat like it was a throne. So, you see why I must flush Potter out, Bellatrix said, her wand twisting in her hands, a restless energy radiating from her. The Dark Lord must know he was right to trust me. I did everything in my power to prevent the theft. I even went to Gringotts myself. I took it in his name. Suddenly, she broke off. All 3 of them, Bellatrix, Snape, and Wormtail, clutched their left forearms in unison. Hermione held her breath, fear coursing through her. If Voldemort summoned Bellatrix. If she was taken to him. But whatever sensation had rippled through their dark marks wasn't a summons. It seems you are in luck, Bella, Snape said quietly, rising to his feet. Neither the Carrows nor the Crab Boy would press their mark for anything less than Potter's appearance. He must be in the castle. Hermione froze. She realized immediately, Harry, Ron, and Draco must have come to retrieve a basilisk fang to destroy the cup. But they wouldn't expect Bellatrix to be here. They wouldn't be prepared, of course, Snape continued. The Dark Lord will also be on his way now that he knows Potter has returned. Whose face had begun to shine with momentary delight, drained of all color. She turned sharply to Hermione, terror etched in every feature. Tell me, she whispered urgently. Tell me what Potter was planning, why he has come here. You must know, Mudblood. Tell me what he intends to do. Hermione's mind raced, and she sensed the impending danger. She tried to hold on to the occlumency principles, but the fear of pain overwhelmed her. Legilimens. Bellatrix shouted, her wand slicing through the air. But Hermione, having cast the spell countless times, noticed the sloppiness in Bellatrix's wand movements. The terror in Bellatrix's pale face only served to fracture her concentration. Legilimens, legilimens. Bellatrix screamed, repeatedly slashing her wand, yet Hermione felt the spells bouncing off her like weak blows. Never mind, she hissed, striding toward Hermione. There are other methods. She seized Hermione by the ankle and dragged her to the center of the circular room. No, Hermione cried out, no, please, I don't know. I have no idea why Harry's here. Her eyes darted to the others. Wormtail sat stiffly in his chair, staring at the headmaster's desk as if awaiting punishment. Snape and Narcissa both looked down at her, silent and motionless. Please, Hermione pleaded. Crucio. Bellatrix snarled, and the curse went on and on. Hermione sobbed, insisting she didn't know why Harry had come, desperately trying to conjure any thought, any plausible lie that might make it stop. She just wanted it to end. Tell me why. Bellatrix screamed, kneeling beside Hermione and pressing her wand into the curve of her jaw. "Tell me why you little wretches stole the cup of the covenant." In the brief silence between curses, a fragment of text she had read resurfaced in Hermione's mind. The revels of goodwill. Because, she sobbed, Harry wanted T to use it to bind people to the Order, just as you know who did with the Death Eaters. That's why. Please, that's why. The pressure of Bellatrix's wand tip eased slightly. Hermione forced her tear-filled eyes open. "I see," Bellatrix said, her gaze piercing into Hermione's face. "Then he will have gone to Gryffindor Tower to find those loyal to him." A new wave of fear washed over Hermione as Bellatrix stood up. What had she done? Draco, Harry, and Ron might now be able to reach the Chamber of Secrets, but she had put Parvati, Lavender, Neville, Seamus, and the rest of Gryffindor House directly in Bellatrix's path. "No," she croaked, reaching out toward Bellatrix. "It isn't. That's not." Bellatrix looked down, her lip curling in disdain. The wildness she had displayed just moments ago had faded, replaced by her familiar arrogance and pride. "You have been most useful," she said, turning to Snape. "I will go to meet Potter at the tower. I suggest you prepare for the Dark Lord's arrival." With that, she swept out of his office without another word. Wormtail muttered something about needing to help and scurried after her, closing the door behind him. A long silence followed. Hermione lay slumped and motionless, listening to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps approaching. Then Snape crouched beside her, peering into her eyes. No, Hermione thought in dread. No, would Snape use legilimency on her now to gain an advantage over Bellatrix? She must not think about the chamber. She must not. Yet, even as she fought to suppress the thought, an image of the girl's bathroom on the second floor flashed across her mind. Clear as a photograph, there was no change in Snape's expression, but she was certain he had seen it. A wave of fear gripped her as he stood up. "Bella is right," he said to Narcissa. "I must go to the gates to meet the Dark Lord. I trust you will take care of the girl. She is no threat in this." Narcissa inclined her head slightly, and with that, he left the office. Hurry, Hermione thought desperately, her mind racing with images of Draco, Harry, and Ron making their way deep into the heart of the castle. Hurry, before Snape welcomes Voldemort and ambushes you there. Long minutes passed before Hermione found the strength to sit up. Her entire body trembled as she did. Her forearm muscles jerked involuntarily. She gritted her teeth, straightened her back, even though her head spun. Finally, breathing heavily, she leaned against the wall and realized Narcissa was watching her. Hermione met her gaze, indifferent, every last drop of energy drained from her. For several more minutes, Narcissa continued to study her, her hair, tousled from being rubbed against the floor, her sweaty face, her robes, askew and disheveled. Then, Narcissa rose gracefully to her feet, moving with an effortless fluidity, like water flowing over a smooth surface. One thought echoed in Hermione's mind, again and again: she lied to Bellatrix. This could mean a myriad of things: shame or self-preservation, hatred of Bellatrix or fear of the Dark Lord, but it might also mean that she had more to protect than anyone realized. Narcissa stopped just a few feet away. "I know he is here," she whispered, her voice low and intense. "In the castle. If Draco went with Potter to Diagon Alley, he will have come here too. I believe you know where they are." Thud, thud. Each beat of Hermione's heart felt painfully loud. If Narcissa intended to hurt her for the information, she surely would have voiced her doubts to Snape and Bellatrix. Yet the thought didn't stop Hermione from flinching as Narcissa crouched down in front of her, lifting her wand. "Renervate," Narcissa murmured. Warm energy surged through Hermione's body, soothing her jittery muscles and clearing her mind. Long fingers wrapped around her elbow, and Narcissa stood, pulling Hermione up with her. Cramps coursed through Hermione, but the warmth began to dispel the tension in her body. Hermione steadied herself against the wall, pushing herself to her full height. "You care for my son," she said. Narcissa's expression remained rigid. "I will stand by him to the end. I have lost my sister and my husband. I will not lose Draco, too." She released Hermione's elbow. "Take it," Narcissa urged in a harsh whisper, pressing the wand into Hermione's hand. In that moment, as her fingers wrapped around the wand's handle, Hermione dared to hope. "Come with me," she rasped, moving toward the door, testing the limits of the energy that Narcissa had bestowed upon her. Though she still felt a bit wobbly, she could move quickly enough. "They've gone to the Chamber of Secrets. If we hurry, we can." As she opened the door, a sharp gasp escaped her lips when a disarming charm struck her. Wormtail stood in the doorway, triumph glinting in his watery eyes. He snatched the wand from the air and declared, "Petrificus totalis." Hermione's hands snapped to her sides, and she teetered backward, shock and anger flooding through her. The last thing she heard before hitting the ground was the door slamming shut and the ominous click of the lock. Outside, the chain slithered away from the Hogwarts gates as the last light faded from the grounds. In the simmering dusk, Lord Voldemort approached the path. He paused as Snape bowed beside him. "I have business on the grounds, Snape," he murmured. "Ensure that I am undisturbed." "Yes, my lord, it will be done." Snape hesitated, casting a wary glance at the snake that slithered over the path behind Voldemort. A web of enchantment sparkled across the snake's massive body, reflecting in Snape's dark eyes. "Perhaps, while you attend to your business, I might bring Nagini up to the castle? We could feed her, groom her." "No," Voldemort interrupted sharply, "Nagini stays with me." "Of course." "Then, I seek your permission," Snape said, bowing once more. "Potter has found a way into the castle, but he knows Hogwarts well. I will ensure he doesn't slip away." "Indeed," Voldemort replied, already moving toward the lake, his gaze fixed on the distant tomb. "Find him, Snape, and bring him to me." Just a little farther, Harry panted, pushing forward. Draco raced after him through the dark, dripping passageway, flinching as his heel crunched down on the skull of a small animal. The eerie skittering of unseen creatures echoed throughout the chamber. They rounded another bend and slowed their frantic pace. Before them loomed a wall engraved with two entwined serpents. Emeralds the size of grapes were embedded in the sheer surface, forming the snake's eyes. As Harry and Draco raised their wands, the gems glinted in the shifting light. A soft hiss escaped Harry's lips. Draco stepped back, his mouth dry, as the door to the Chamber of Secrets creaked open and slid aside. For the first time since they had left Gringotts, thoughts of Hermione and his mother vanished from Draco's mind. He stepped into the chamber, his eyes drawn to the colossal skeleton of the basilisk gleaming beneath the statue of Salazar Slytherin. The sockets that once held the serpent's deadly eyes gaped wide, immense pockets of shadow that seemed to absorb the light from their wands. The beast's fangs curled down from its bleached skull, and as they stood before it, Draco noticed that the longest fawn would stretch from his elbow to his fingertips, with inches to spare. "If we use Defendo," Draco suggested, eyeing the spots where the fangs connected to the skull, "the venom might drip onto us." "Yeah. I think it's safer to snap the whole thing off. Here." Harry handed Draco the Horcrux and reached up to the serpent's jaw. He grasped one of the smaller fangs, working it back and forth until it finally snapped free. "Just a moment, I'm going to grab a few more. We might need one for the snake, too." Draco glanced down at the golden cup in his hand, its elegant H engraved on the side. He could feel the pulsating energy of the Horcrux, but unlike the cool allure of the delicate diadem or the heavy opulence of the locket, this cup radiated warmth, a welcoming presence, like a caring friend. He held it firmly by its neck as Harry turned away from the basilisk skeleton, carefully extending one of the fangs toward him. "You hold the cup," Harry instructed. "I'll, Expelliarmus." The sudden voice sent a chill through Draco's body. Had the Carrows followed them here? "Snape," he barely had time to react before both the cup and his wand were yanked from his grasp. Harry shouted and lunged for his own wand, but it was too late. They spun around, and Draco's gaze fell upon a thin, balding man lurking in the shadows, his wand outstretched in a silvery hand. The items he had summoned floated around him before settling slowly to the ground, the golden cup into his left hand, their wands into his pocket, and the basilisk fangs scattered at his feet. "Wormtail?" Draco and Harry exclaimed in unison. That's right, Wormtail replied, stepping out of the darkness, his small, watery eyes gleaming with excitement. I've done it. And no one else can take credit, no one else can say I didn't. Yet, Draco noticed that Wormtail's wand hand trembled slightly. He was only about 10 steps away, and it seemed too close for comfort, especially as Wormtail's gaze kept darting back to Harry's face. Wormtail, Draco said, advancing toward him, you have no idea what you're. Don't come any closer. Wormtail's voice shot up, his wand rising again in a panic. On his face, one might have thought he was staring down an armed battalion rather than a wandless teenager. I'm warning you. I'll curse you, yeah. And then what? Draco shot back, though he paused, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Do you even know what you're holding? Wormtail glanced down into the crook of his arm. It's the Cup of the Covenant, boy, he spat, clearly resentful. Of course it's more than that, Peter, Harry interjected, stepping up to stand beside Draco. His tone was calm and steady. Though Draco could still detect the underlying disdain, you're in over your head. This is something Voldemort would kill you for even knowing. Pettigrew went pale, and Draco couldn't quite tell if it was from fear of the threat or the name itself, and Draco's right, Harry continued. What's your plan now? If you stun us, you'll have to bring Voldemort here to find us, or figure out how to get us out of the castle. The problem is, there are 1,000 members of the Order spreading through Hogwarts right now. That's why we're here. You'll have to get past all of them to have a chance. Pettigrew looked upward, swallowing hard, his last flicker of excitement giving way to sheer panic. Then, he stammered. I'll tell you what you can do instead, Harry said. You can stay here in the chamber and ride out the battle. No one can get inside this place, only I can open the door. You hand over our wands and that cup, and you can come out in a day or so when it's all over. If the Death Eaters win, they'll assume you fought us and survived. If we win, I'll tell the Order you helped us. Either way, you'll be safe. The disgust in Harry's voice was unmistakable now. That's all you want, isn't it? Pettigrew's lips quivered. But I've done it, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. The dim light flickered as Draco's wand hand, gleaming brilliantly silver, trembled in the shadows. What they all wanted to do. Snape, Bellatrix. His heart sank. Bellatrix. Is she here? Is she at Hogwarts? Pettigrew hesitated, then gave a small nod. Alarm flashed between Draco and Harry. Does she have a girl with her? Draco pressed. Hermione Granger, and my mother, is she here too? Yes, they're all here. Your mother, the girl, they're locked in the headmaster's office. Bellatrix brought us all here. Draco felt an urge to bolt from the chamber, but he forced himself to maintain eye contact with Wormtail. There was something unsettlingly familiar about this moment. He had once stood at the other end of a wand, facing a wandless Dumbledore. Offered mercy by that same Dumbledore. Look, Draco said, keeping his voice low and steady, you gave the Dark Lord back his body. A flicker of pride crossed Pettigrew's face. Yes. I did. But they still treat you like this. The pride faded instantly. Take it from me, all right? It never gets better than this, no matter what you do. No matter who you are. Draco glanced at Harry. Take Potter's deal, Wormtail. It's your best chance. Harry took another step closer. You owe me, Wormtail. You owe my parents. Pettigrew looked up at them, small and frail, and lowered his wand. It all happened in an instant. Before they could say another word, Pettigrew's dazzling silver hand released its grip on the wand and turned against him. He let out a cry, desperately trying to fend it off with the cup, but the silver hand slammed back into his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Harry and Draco rushed toward him, but then the silver hand seized one of the basilisk fangs lying on the ground. They froze mid-step, and Draco's mind raced with wild thoughts. Hand that threatened to attack them with the deadly fawn. If they dared to run, instead, The luminous fingers crushed the fang into the tiny cup that Pettigrew held in his other hand. Fine powder mixed with clear venom, filling the cup to the brim. A howl of fear and realization escaped Pettigrew's lips as he attempted to fling the Horcrux away, but it was too late. The silvery hand had already taken hold of the cup. Desperate, Pettigrew grabbed another fang from the ground with his human hand and stabbed it into the cup, piercing the shining hand. The cup of the Covenant twisted and smoked, deforming and drooping under the pressure, but the silver hand relentlessly forced the golden relic against his lips, pouring the deadly poison between his clenched teeth. Draco and Harry stood frozen, riveted and horrified, unable to look away. As Pettigrew's convulsions grew weaker, the poison claiming him, Draco's gaze fell on the handle of the Elder Wand protruding from his pocket. A wave of bitter disgust washed over him as he crouched beside Pettigrew and drew the Elder Wand, reclaiming it. Yet, once he was there, he found he couldn't stand. His eyes were glued to the sight of Pettigrew's face spasming, his burned mouth twitching, until finally, he went still, liberated at last from the Dark Lord's service. The dazzling silver hand faded and dissipated, leaving only a stump behind. The twisted remnants of the Horcrux clattered to the floor of the Chamber of Secrets. Draco looked up at Harry, whose face reflected a mix of pity and revulsion. He extended the holly wand to Harry, who accepted it. Suddenly, they heard a scraping sound near the head of the chamber. This time, they reacted instantly, whirling around with wands raised, and there stood Severus Snape in the entrance. "Wait!" Snape commanded, his voice echoing throughout the chamber. But they didn't wait. Impedimenta. Harry shouted at the threat before them. At the same instant Draco shouted, "Incarcerus." Snape deflected the spell with an impatient flick of his wand and strode forward, his teeth bared in a menacing grin. He waved his wand, and for a brief moment, a brilliant light erupted from the tip, forming an indistinct shape that began to coalesce into something more. Stupefy. Harry's spell shot through the emerging magic, striking Snape squarely in the chest. Draco took off running down the length of the chamber, Harry right beside him. They both halted above Snape, staring down in disbelief at his unconscious form. What was he playing at? Harry murmured. "I don't know," Draco replied, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. They both understood that Snape should have been able to outduel them with ease. Shaking off the troubling thought, Draco focused on the immediate concern. "I'm going to his office. Now." "We'll bring him," Harry said, nudging Snape's body with his toe. "We can keep him locked up there." Draco nodded in agreement. With a flick of his wand, Snape was bound, and with another gesture, he rose into the air, his head lolling awkwardly. "And what about?" Draco glanced back at the huddled form in the shadows of Slytherin's statue. "Leave him," Harry muttered. "We can come back for his body." As they stepped back into the girls' bathroom, Harry leaned heavily against one of the sinks. Though he made no sound of pain, Draco could tell immediately that he was slipping into Voldemort's mind. Harry's eyes rolled beneath his closed lids as if he were in a deep sleep. A minute later, they snapped open. "He's opened Dumbledore's tomb," Harry said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "He knows we have the Elder Wand." Draco swallowed hard. "So he's called them. The Death Eaters, the Ministry. All of them, they're coming."